Hi everyone, we are here with Michael Donoghue, who is the Disaster Recovery Manager for New Zealand Red Cross, and my name is Jess, and I'm one of the communications team with New Zealand Red Cross. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. We're going to talk about mental health in the time of COVID-19. And I wanted to introduce you to Michael. So Michael is my colleague and he's worked in crisis and trauma for 15 years. Michael joined New Zealand Red Cross in 2014 to lead our disaster recovery work, supporting the community following the Canterbury earthquakes. Since then, Michael has worked through many emergencies across New Zealand, including the November 2016 earthquake and the Christchurch terror attacks. Before joining Red Cross, Michael worked with victim support and alongside young people with challenging behaviour in the UK. So welcome, Michael.
Kia ora, Jess.
So, Michael, we're here to talk about mental health and wellbeing, but there's a few terms that I think we need to discuss and unravel before we do that. So I wondered if you could explain to us what the terms psychosocial support and psychological first aid mean, so that when we talk a little bit more, people will understand.
Sure, yeah, that's a really good place to start, Jess. Look, the word psychosocial is basically two words fused together. That's the best way to kind of envisage it. So we have the word psychological and we have the word social. So psychological is really kind of how we feel, and the social aspect is how we relate to others. So if we think of that, of the psychological effectively being our internal processes and our internal feelings, and then the other part is our relationship with everyone else. And those two things are really important, and they really belong together as well. The other term you asked about was psychological first aid. We sometimes shorten that to PFA. And psychological first aid is an evidence-informed tool that we can use to provide psychosocial support. So PFA basically has been used and now used to support people who are experiencing some distress after disaster. So we know from the previous disasters that from the past that some interventions really don't work. So post 10/11, they used something called critical incident stress debriefing, and that was very much a clinical approach, and that was very much a formal, structured approach. And the findings were that this actually wasn't helpful. In fact, it may have done more harm than good. So PFA is something, it's an approach that's endorsed by the World Health Organization. There are lots of NGOs that use it all over the world, and it basically gives people, any layperson, a basic approach to have a conversation with someone who's feeling distressed. Now, I don't know about you, Jess, but you know, I've got some friends there that occasionally find it really difficult to speak to people who are distressed. As a guy, I quite often have an experience where I'll have a friend in my friendship group who's distressed for one reason. They may have had a bereavement or something happened in their life, and I'll speak to my other friends and I'll say, look, have you spoken? Have you reached out to them? And they'll say, no, I haven't. And I think, well, that's really strange, because you'd normally talk to them every single day, but all of a sudden you're taking a step back when they need you most. You know, why are you doing that? And they say, because I'm worried about saying the wrong thing. And sometimes that can be human nature, that when the person or a friend or whoever needs support, we take a step back at the time they need us most. And sometimes it's out of a fear of saying the wrong thing. So PFA, it's an evidence-informed approach that gives me some basic tools and a wee bit of structure so that I can engage with that person in a safe way, and also in a culturally appropriate way. So the great thing about PFA is it encourages people to link to their own cultural strengths, their own cultural networks that's appropriate for them, their beliefs, their values, and their cultural settings that are normal. So the great thing about it is it is very adaptable. It's not a pre-formulated fixed approach. It is really flexible. So that's why we recommend it. That's why New Zealand Red Cross really endorses and utilizes PFA in our work post-disaster.
Yeah. So thanks for that, because I think those terms are really important and sometimes can get pretty confusing. I know that I can get pretty confused. And I wanted to say, for anyone who's joined us, welcome. And I hope that you're here to learn a little bit, and we really want you to ask questions. So Michael is an expert in this space of mental health and well-being. And as he said, sometimes we can stop ourselves from asking questions because we don't feel like it's the right time, but now's your time. So shout out if you have any questions. I'd love to hear where you're from. I'm in Wellington, New Zealand, and Michael is down in rural Canterbury. So we'd love to know where you're watching from. So Michael, very quickly, tell us a little bit. I mean, I know, but the others watching might not know. What's New Zealand Red Cross doing in this space and generally in response to the COVID-19 crisis that's happening around the world? What's happening in Aotearoa?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jess. And so in New Zealand Red Cross, we're utilising our disaster welfare support teams up and down the country, and we're getting requests in through the local health organisations and the national health organisations and the civil defence groups for all kinds of assistance. And so some of it is really, really practical. So one of the things the Red Cross does in New Zealand, it delivers hot meals. We have this Meals on Wheels, and we deliver it to people that for some reason or another aren't able to make themselves a hot meal. Perhaps it's getting to the shops, or they don't have the ability to do it. So this is already quite a vulnerable group. So our disaster welfare support groups have been stepping in to help deliver these hot meals, which is really a key interaction. And one of the other things we've been doing is providing telephone support. Now, in New Zealand Red Cross, we have 15,000 members and we have a lot of stakeholders. So we've been reaching out to them with our PFA-trained disaster welfare support team. And the feedback has been great. Some people have said, look, it's just so nice to get a call once a week from someone just to check in and say, look, how am I doing, and listen to me and speak. So that human connection is really powerful. We've seen that time and time again after disasters, reaching out to people, and that human component is really, really powerful. The other thing we're doing is we've also updated a lot of our PFA resources. We've got a guide for psychological first aid. Just happen to have a copy here. And this guide is basically sets out how we can utilize psychological first aid. And so we were planning to make some revisions to this. We've brought that forwards, and the Ministry of Health in New Zealand has arranged for us to have 15,000 copies printed. We're sending that out. New Zealand Police, of course, they're at the front edge of the wedge, really on the front line, supporting people who are distressed, and they've asked for 5,000 copies. So we'll be getting this to their staff, and we're also putting some of our PFA training, just introductory training, online. We, of course, the best way to do PFA training is face to face, but we've had to adapt. Things are changing. We've really had to think about how we work and adapt based on the constraints that we're facing now.
Yeah, and the online course is really awesome, and I think it's a great way to start learning about this. I wanted to say, I see that people are here from all over the world, which is amazing. Bangladesh, the UK, Norway, Nigeria, Panama, Austria, Sweden. I won't go on and on, but welcome. You're all so welcome. It's really great to have you here. And I see that Sylvia Krista through LinkedIn. Thank you for your comment. Michael, we have a question. Sylvia asks, mindful meditation needs to be implemented as a daily dose of spiritual medicine for all of us right now. So what's your thoughts on that mindfulness kind of trend, if you will, that's going around? What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think there are so many different ways that we can use our own inner strength and inner resilience. And I think anything that allows you to remain calm, to remain focused, to regulate your breathing, Anything that really centers you is really, really important. For some people, that might be meditation. It could be prayer. I think there are so many people have different beliefs, so many different values. You've got to find what works for you, and what works for one person may not work for someone else. I know that one of the ways that I relax and feel really centered is being out on the rugby pitch. I referee rugby. That's one of the things I do in my spare time. I coach as well. I can't play. I'm too old now. But I feel really at peace in that setting, whereas a lot of people might find it quite stressful. But I find it really, really peaceful for me. But I've had to adapt and change as well, because community rugby has stopped in New Zealand, and anyone that knows New Zealand knows that rugby is a big part of the culture here. It's a big part of how people connect. So look, I've had to adapt as well. But look, I think mindfulness and meditation, absolutely fantastic. At the beginning and the end of every day, I make sure that I have some quiet time as well. So look, yeah, it's finding what works for you, and don't try new things as well. I think be open to new experiences.
Yeah, I think that's a great what you're saying about, for everybody it's going to be a little bit different, so there's not one way. I know for me, mindfulness is hard. I'm pretty hyperactive, but yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's it can be really valuable, amongst all of those other things. So thank you, Sylvia. I hope that helps, but if you have a follow-up question, send it through to us. If you've just joined us, please let us know where you're joining from. We'd love to shout you out. And just so you know, my name's Jess. Michael and I are from New Zealand Red Cross, and we're here to just talk about mental health and wellbeing in the time of COVID-19. And so, Michael, COVID is pretty different from other events, disasters, emergencies that we have responded to in New Zealand. What do you think are the kind of key areas of mental health and wellbeing that all of us should be aware of right now?
Jess, that's a huge question, and I think the first thing is just to recognise where we are at the moment. So recognise the complexity of the situation, the complexity internationally as well. This is unprecedented. Many of us haven't seen anything like this, or well, I don't think any of us have seen anything like this really. So just recognizing that complexity. In New Zealand, we have 4 levels, and we're at level 4, which means we're in complete lockdown. There's discussion around whether we move back down to level 3, so there's that uncertainty. And I think we're seeing that play out globally as well. I think there is real uncertainty around what does the future hold. Are we going to have more social contact, or are we going to have less social contact? Are we going to be able to reach out to our family and friends, or are we not? So I think that there's a lot of complexity there, and there's a lot of uncertainty as well. And one of the things I think we're seeing is the social fabric of society is really being stretched and really distorted, and sometimes compressed as well. It's not our usual experience. So it is very, very different, and we know that after disasters, quite often there can be shocks to communities, and change can be foisted on a community in a very short space of time. And I guess for us all, we're the place we're at, we're trying to make sense of this. But I think some of the key areas, some of the key things we should be aware of right now are just of some of the needs. So we know 3 things. We know that pre-existing needs that are there that have gone unnoticed may be uncovered during this disaster. We also know that pre-existing needs that we have in this space may be exacerbated, and we also know that new needs may be created as well. So it's being mindful of that within ourselves, within others as well. And some people are able to work, some people are unable to work. Some people have had their support network stripped away very, very quickly. So so I guess we're all experiencing new things, and some of it's good as well. I think we need to recognize that, but I also want to recognize as well as we are seeing huge numbers of people being bereaved by this disaster, which in itself presents challenges under normal circumstances. But under these circumstances, we are hearing and we are seeing some really harrowing stories of people passing away in socially isolated circumstances, which is really challenging at a human level. That's really challenging. But we are also seeing people reach out to others in new ways. We are seeing new opportunities for people to connect, and we are seeing some powerful things in humanity that do give us a sense of hope. And one of the things that I've seen, I mean, I've had to adjust everything that I'm doing. I'm working at home at the moment, and we've got some elderly neighbours. And one of the things I was thinking is, I need to keep an eye on my elderly neighbours because they're obviously in the at-risk group. They're really vulnerable. But I've actually found them to be really kind of resilient, and even so much so they've been kind of trying to help us. So we've got these neighbours, both in their 80s, that live just next door to us, and they've got this amazing veggie garden. They've got more veggies than they know what to do with. And so they've come up with a system where they kind of wave and shout at us, and then they put some of these vegetables almost every other day on the fence post, and they leave it for us to collect. And so that was me thinking, with my preconceived ideas, we've got these, I've got some elderly neighbours. We need to think of how to look after them. But hey, they're actually, they've got amazing resilience. They're adapting. They're reaching out. They're looking to help us as well. So we're seeing all these new things, which is really, really neat as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that story. And I think it raises a really great point. It's really easy to talk about vulnerable people, but what you're saying about, everyone has different strengths. I think that's so special and important to recognize. Hey. I wondered if you said a little bit about being mindful of where people are and, being mindful of those different changes to people's health and well-being. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more. What do you mean by being mindful? How can I be mindful in a practical sense of where someone's at when I'm engaging with them?
Yeah, well, look, I think the first thing is to be aware of yourself. So before you engage with someone else, check in with yourself effectively. So where are you at? Your circumstances may have changed. Your normal routines, supports that you have available. You may have a daily walk or a daily commute, and you may use that time to clear your head, for example. Now, if that's stripped away, how are you replacing that, or what are you doing differently? Now, that doesn't mean you need to try and replicate it, because sometimes you can't replicate it. So what are you going to do to support yourself? So it's being really kind of deliberate in our own thinking process around well-being, and really taking that on board, and then reaching out to others as well, and being really being really gentle in the way we approach, because we're all trying to make sense of this. We don't have the answers. We have this uncertainty, and you can answer if your neighbor's saying, look, when's the lockdown going to stop? Just tell me when. But you being there to provide emotional support, you're letting her ventilate, you're validating what she's saying. You say, look, I absolutely know how you feel. So everyone's trying to make sense of their experience at the moment. And as humans, I mean, that's kind of what we're programmed to do, is to try and make sense of the experiences around us. And we're also kind of hardwired to identify threats as well, and to have some kind of response to that. So sometimes people feel like they should be doing more, or they want to be doing something. So finding a way to do something or to reach out is really, really powerful. Hey, our neighbors, sorry to go back to that example, but you just reminded me, the elderly chap, he plays the accordion as well, and he stood on his porch and he heard our children playing outside and just played the accordion. Now he's quite far away, so there's plenty of physical distancing there, but our kids loved it, listening to someone giving them an accordion concert and it was just completely spontaneous. But they thanked him and waved, and he would have felt great being able to give to others. So I think, I think we, finding new ways to connect is really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I love the idea of just rural Canterbury and an accordion playing for these kids. That's so awesome. And I wanted to say to anyone who's watching, please let us know where you're watching from. My name is Jess, and I'm from New Zealand Red Cross, and this is my colleague Michael, who is the Disaster Recovery Manager for New Zealand Red Cross, and we're just talking about mental health and wellbeing in the time of COVID-19. I wanted to share with you, Michael, Victoria from LinkedIn said, people are scared of the unknown. Sometimes you just need someone to talk. And I think you can agree, sometimes just a listening ear is, really important, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you, Massimo on LinkedIn. From a disaster management perspective, I'm glad you're here, Michael. How are you supporting your health system? So I think, Massimo, maybe correct me if I'm wrong or if I misinterpreted this, but I think what Massimo's asking is how are we, in our response, helping the Ministry of Health, our national health agency?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, Ministry of Health is the lead agency for this disaster. They're also the lead agency for psychosocial support as well. So in New Zealand, we organise our civil defence into different sub-functions. Welfare is one of those sub-functions, and the psychosocial support is a stream of work that's led by the Ministry of Health. So we are not the lead agency, but we are a support agency. And the Ministry of Health do connect with us regularly. We have regular connection with them to utilise our disaster welfare support teams to provide practical support. They acknowledge the vast network that we have of people trained in psychological first aid. They also acknowledge what we can offer from a training point of view with psychological first aid, and that's wider psychosocial support as well. So yeah, one of the things we learned, I guess, from lots of other disasters, and Christchurch, in Canterbury, we had significant earthquakes. Some of you may remember in 2010, 2011, 2016. We had another very large earthquake that affected the upper South Island and some of the North Island as well. We've had the recent terror attacks as well. And one of the things that we've been really cognizant of in New Zealand is no one organisation can solve this by themselves. So we've had to partner like we've never had to partner before, and your partnerships are really tested, and they're really crucial. One organisation isn't going to fix it. You haven't got the reach, you haven't got the capacity, you haven't got maybe the knowledge or the skills in one organisation. We need to reach out as broadly as possible to as much of the community as possible, and so no one organisation can do that. And so particularly in New Zealand, partnership has been really, really key.
Yeah, awesome. And I wanted to, on that note, speaking about our disaster welfare and support teams, I just wanted to shout out, we have a 380 or more than 380 disaster response volunteers. We also have thousands of volunteers across New Zealand. So just wanted to take this opportunity, not just in New Zealand, but around the world. Red Cross and Red Crescent volunteers are doing such an incredible job. So if you're watching, thank you. It's amazing to just see our global community come together during this global crisis. So yeah, please, sorry if I'm saying this again for some of you watching, but wherever you are in the world, please let us know. And we're so grateful for you coming to join us this morning or this evening. I see there's another comment on LinkedIn. Shauna Bruce says, it's interesting because we need to apply psychological first aid to both our response team and the general public. So we are looking to support internally, but we are communicating to external audiences as well. Shauna, I don't know if you're from New Zealand Red Cross, but this sounds like a lot of the conversations that we're having. Michael, do you want to talk about how we're kind of working both internally and externally to make sure that people are supported?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and caring for the carers has become a real theme for us at New Zealand Red Cross, and looking after our people is really, really important. So there's a variety of ways we do that. We recognise quite often that one size doesn't fit all. So one of the things we are putting in place is we really kind of ramped up the kind of training and the support that's available. And some of that, look, to be perfectly honest, we've learned the hard way. It is really important that we don't burn people out. It's really important that people feel as if they've got somewhere to go if actually this is all getting a bit too much or it's getting on top of me. But in saying that, we also know that one size doesn't fit all. So giving people several opportunities for support is really crucial. We know that some people might feel really well supported participating in a group discussion, whereas others might not be. It might actually just be, I need to sit down and have a chat with someone in a one-on-one. Some people do like it structured and regular. Others do like a little bit less structure. So we've had to find ways to support everyone, and that is a real challenge. But it's something that we've done so well. And look, huge kudos to the leadership team and the senior leaders at New Zealand Red Cross. They really do value everyone, and we've all felt really tremendously supported at the New Zealand Red Cross, and that's because our leadership has been very attentional in saying this is a priority for us. This is a really high priority for us. And so when you have that buy-in, it actually becomes easy because that changes the culture. It changes the conversation as an organization. And we do also reach out to other organizations as well. So it's not just an insular activity. There are other people that I connect with as well, work in similar fields or related fields, and there is a community of support as well. So it's important that we touch bases. And I would say to everyone, who is the person that if it all goes pear-shaped at 3 a.m. in the morning, you can ring and we'll pick up and we'll listen to you. If you're working in this area, you need to work to find that person in your life, and you need that person. You need that level of support, because it's really, really important. But also, even if you don't use it, knowing that it's there is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that in itself is really liberating.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I hope that no one is going out and calling at 3 a.m. for fun. But I think you raise a great point about knowing who the people you can reach out to are, especially right now when things are so challenging and can be a little bit, uncertain. I wanted to say hi to everyone watching from around the world. I see a few people have joined us from Kenya, Argentina, Algeria, Mexico, Ecuador, Egypt, Greece, Portugal. Incredible. Welcome. If you're just joining us or if you've joined us pretty recently, I'm Jess and I'm from New Zealand Red Cross. This is my colleague Michael Donoghue, the Disaster Recovery Manager, and we're here to answer your questions, so please send them through. And there's no stupid question where, everyone is in a state of uncertainty, and we're all dealing with this across the globe. It's incredible and scary in that way that it is so global. So please comment. We've got a few more minutes here, so we're here for you. Michael, we've got a tough question, Michael, so prepare yourself. No pressure. So Gary Osorio asks, he says, sometimes first responders have personal protective equipment, but sometimes health workers don't have PPE. So this is the PPE conversation, which has been rolling around for a long time. And obviously it's not either of our fields, but I guess what can be done about the PPE thing? And I guess we've got some stuff we can fall back on that we know about, right?
Yeah, so it'd be useful to clarify. So from a personal protective equipment, I mean, really, there's a few things. I mean, there's the health and safety considerations. So if an organization is tasking someone to do this, from a health and safety, they should be making sure that they're people are safe. And then I think from an ethical point of view, they should also be making sure that their people are safe. But I also know there's been a lot of conversation around the efficacy of the PPE. So what efficacy? So I think we need to be mindful of the evidence might be saying different things, or there might be different messages. So in New Zealand, we're very fortunate to have a very proactive Ministry of Health that lays out some guidelines around this and what we should be doing. And without getting into the specific details of it, following the best advice that you have available, and the organization that you're attached to, approaching them and making sure that they're aware of the best advice and following the best advice. There's been a lot of noise in media as well, and sometimes that's great because it highlights an issue, but other times it can confuse and distort the message. It can send out messages that may not be aligned with the official advice. So look, I think it's a case of getting the best advice possible and then advocating within your own organization that you're maybe attached to, or your community, around how you meet those requirements. And everyone's in a different space, Jess, so it's really hard for us to say, look, this is where what you should be doing, because we're seeing some countries are coming out of lockdown, some are still going in, some are extending. Everyone's in a very different place, so it's a very contextual question.
It's a complex question, but it's a good one, Gary, and I think it's a discussion that we should keep having. But I think something that I've been thinking about, and I think you'd agree, Michael, is we need to make sure that first and foremost, those healthcare workers, those frontline workers, have access to that personal protective equipment. And I wondered, Michael, if you'd had any thoughts around, sometimes PPE masks and that kind of stuff can be used as to protect something that might be more psychological. It might make you feel more safe. I don't know if you had any thoughts around using a mask because it makes you feel better, when actually maybe there's other practices that we could get into which might help that as well. Tricky follow-up question. I think there are two things there. I think feeling a strong sense of well-being and feeling psychologically safe is really important. But from a purely medical point of view, we need to separate that out. With this, we're dealing with a virus that's contagious. So there are some very strong kind of clinical evidence around what PPE should be required. So it's whilst it's useful for us to think about psychological safety, we need to think about what is the evidence saying at this moment in time around the minimum requirements for personal protective equipment. And I mean, certainly we should always be advocating that those minimum requirements are met. Great answer, Michael. And I think we might have our last question for the day. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you are. It's been great to chat with you all, and to chat with you, Michael. Thanks for jumping in at 7 a.m. Adamo Dodo, and I'm so sorry if I've said that wrong, but hello. And he has a question. They have a question, how to continue to support mental health action during COVID-19 when we know that the centres are closed around so many countries. So I guess how to do mental health in a time of isolation. Yeah, look, that's a brilliant question. I'm actually really pleased you asked it as well. And look, there is some really neat things that we can do and that we should be doing. And there's a really good amount of evidence that informs what we do. So thinking about it from providing support in that psychosocial space, we know that there's some stuff that's really useful. So there was a paper around how to support distressed people,
And it came up with these 5 promotes, or 5 things that we can actually do. And in all my experience, these things actually work as well. So I'll just rattle through them now, if that's all right, Jess. So one of the things that we can do is to promote calm. And we know that this is really effective. So thinking about ourselves first before we support others is, how am I promoting calm? And that might be slowing down how I speak. So speak maybe 10% slower than I want to speak, to regulate my own breathing when I communicate with others, because as human beings, we want to mirror other people. It's a kind of natural default. It's, if you can imagine, if you've ever seen a shouting match, if one person is speaking very softly, the other person normally brings their voice down. But we normally see the reverse. People escalate and escalate and escalate. But it works the other way as well. We can promote calm in the way we relate to others. So we know that about 70% of communication is nonverbal. So think about your body language, think about your own breathing, think about the tone of voice, think about the language that you're using as well. And so promoting calm. So how do we do that? So, I mean, one of the things we could do, even at a household level, is maybe limit the access we have to news. So for myself, I only access the news twice a day, once at the beginning and once at the end. And that's so I'm not kind of trying to process all this information that's coming through. So one of the practical ways we can do is only go to trusted sources for information, and then limit the access to that. But then also in the conversations that I have. So if I end up speaking to someone and I note that they're in a really kind of heightened state of arousal or heightened state of excitement, I will then deliberately slow the way that I speak down, and that in itself normally promotes calm as well. So the other thing is to promote safety, which is really important, and we touched on that just a minute ago. The need for really practical safety, for those needs to be met, is really, really important. But also from a well-being point of view, how am I keeping myself safe? If I'm responsible for supporting others or leading a team, or I may have children, or I may have animals to look after. I've got to look after myself. So knowing yourself is really important. Knowing when you are getting burned out, when you need a break, taking a break as well. Having that person that you can ring up at 3 a.m. in the morning, having that colleague or that friend or that support as well, from your own point of view, is really, really important. And the other thing is, so we've got promote safety, promote calm, promote connectedness. And this is really challenging. This is really challenging, Jess. So much of what we do every day, we are social beings, and that's been stripped away to some degree. But finding new ways to connect. I told you the cool story about our neighbours and how they've been reaching out to us. But I think that's really challenging. But we're finding, we are seeing all these stories are emerging of people finding new opportunities to connect, and they're using it as an excuse to connect with people that they may have connected with for years. And I was just reading something this morning, and it was talking about, well, all these kind of parents that are spending this time with their children. So, there is some good things, and then pet owners as well. So some of them, being able to spend more time with their animals, or their livestock, or whatever. So this idea of connection, is really important. And the key thing for me is the ability to adapt and the adaptive capacity. So that's the thing that we need to be kind of nourishing in ourselves, our ability to adapt to these challenging circumstances that we face. The other thing, the other promote is promoting self and group efficacy, which is challenging, because how do you promote that at this time, given that we may be living in quite confined circumstances? But that in itself can be through a conversation. So if you are speaking to someone who is distressed, rather than presenting them with what you think the answers are, ask questions to maybe direct them there. So if you were speaking to me now, Jess, and you were saying, look, I'm really stressed, I find it really challenging, rather than saying, hey, go out and exercise, Jess, I might say, oh, wow, what do you normally do? And you might say, well, I normally go for a run in this beautiful park, but I haven't been able to. So asking the right questions, so not giving them the answers, can sometimes be really key, and leading people on, and letting them reflect on things as well. So promoting self-efficacy is really, really powerful. We know that. And the fifth, and I think the most powerful one, is to promote hope. And that can be really challenging. So promoting hope can be really challenging because there are all these unknowns. When's life going to get back to normal? So how do I promote hope if I don't know when life is going to get back to normal? But we need to be cognizant of, there are things that we can influence and there are things that we can't influence. So I think, first of all, recognizing that. So I can't influence when the lockdown is going to finish in New Zealand, but I can influence how often that I speak to my folks and my parents. So recognizing what I can influence and my sphere of influence is really important. So one of the things I'm doing is deliberately not checking how long the lockdown's going to last every day. So if I was to check every day to see, oh, I wonder if it's going to be lifted, I would really be using a lot of emotional energy. So just protecting myself from that is really important. And then thinking of all the good things. So there are good that comes from it. And one of the great things about working for New Zealand Red Cross is that in the Red Cross, it's a humanitarian organization. So we know that humans are amazing, and we have this amazing inbuilt resilience and this amazing ability to adapt. And yes, we are really, really challenged at the moment. But we have hope in the future. We have hope in each other. So holding on to that is really, really important as well. So sorry to go on, but they're the 5 promotes that I really do think are really kind of pragmatic. Promoting safety, promoting calm, promoting connectedness, promoting self and group efficacy, and promoting hope.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. That's awesome. And I think that those 5 tips are so useful as we move forward. So I think we're going to wrap up now, but really appreciate you coming on, and thank you to everyone around the world who's joined us. I hope that this has been useful, and I hope that you will keep well. So thank you for joining, and we will see you soon.